Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Crapo, again for having this hearing. And good afternoon, Commissioner Sheehan. It's really nice to see you. I do want to ask you a question. You talk about the importance of a long-term reauthorization of federal surface transportation programs for infrastructure projects in New Hampshire. Short-term extensions could disrupt these projects and impact our workforce, our economy, and our road safety. So can you give us examples, Commissioner, of projects in New Hampshire that would be disrupted by a short-term extension of surface transportation programs, and how a short extension would impact New Hampshire's economy?
Well, thank you, Senator, and it's great to see you as well this morning. Any interruption in the federal surface transportation program would have devastating consequences, especially in a cold weather state like New Hampshire, with a relatively short construction season. The inability to advertise projects in the fall and winter could mean that we would lose the majority of an entire construction season. And so even short-term extensions could have longer-term impacts. We have projects of all types and sizes that we would plan to advance, from important resiliency work like scour mitigation on some of our critical bridges, to investments in intersection safety improvements, guardrail upgrades. And then there's numerous projects that are tremendously important to communities. We have a lot of transportation alternative funding that is anticipated to be utilized, with projects being advertised in the first quarter of the next federal fiscal year. So we really want to be able to deliver on those commitments, which is why a timely reauthorization is so important.
Well, thanks so much. And again, thank you for your leadership and for the work you do. And I look forward to seeing you back home in person soon. I want to move to a question for Ms. Bloomfield. Ms. Bloomfield, broadband is a necessity for families and small businesses in the 21st century, and you've surely been making that point this morning. Today, I reintroduced the Broadband Financing Flexibility Act, a bipartisan bill with Senator Capito that would expand tax-advantaged financing tools for rural broadband projects. Our bill would make it easier for state and local governments to work with private partners and finance high-speed rural broadband projects with tax-exempt bonds. How would these kinds of financing tools encourage private sector deployment of high-speed broadband to rural areas?
I congratulate you on your initiative. I think it's really, I think it's an exciting initiative. I think that we have not seen a lot of our community-based providers utilizing bonds, but I think that if there's the ability for private providers, again, community-based providers, to be able to access some of these bond funds, I think that could be, again, another piece of figuring out ways to actually make what is a tough business model actually a go, particularly because we're seeing in some areas a lot of partnerships where local municipalities and governments are reaching out to our community-based providers to say, we've got a broadband void. How can we work together to actually build a network? Letting the municipality, potentially handle some of the financing and work with the bonds, and letting the broadband provider actually provide the broadband. So I think that your initiative to focus on communities that need broadband access is really critical. The fact that you are looking to use funding for future-proof networks is really another positive. And I think the bonds themselves will help upfront with.
The year-end relief package contained my bipartisan bill with Senator Grassley to extend the deadline for state and local governments to use relief funds for broadband and other infrastructure projects. Through the American Rescue Plan, states and localities will soon have access to additional assistance that can be used for rural broadband projects. Ms. Bloomfield, how have the state and local relief funds to date helped expand rural broadband connectivity? And what lessons from the past year can we apply to supporting rural broadband connectivity going forward?
Well, first of all, I have to thank you for extending, because when the CARES Act went through, everybody was very excited to see this additional funding coming out that they could use on the state level. And so many states did agree to allow the CARES Act funding to be used for broadband, but suddenly that clock was ticking. Yeah. And, if you weren't in line for fiber, you weren't in line for some of the equipment, that deadline just became a barrier. So extending it became very helpful. What I think some of those initiatives have done have really prompted states who did not have state broadband programs to now create their own programs. So that partnership, I think, is really going to be important, having the federal programs that exist, partnering with the state programs who probably in a lot of ways know best where those gaps are within the state. That is the way we're really going to bridge this digital divide.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.